Tell me about Billy Webb. What kind of guy was he? What's your recollections of him?
Kind of quiet.
Quiet?
Wasn't for a guy that was actually running things. He's kind of quiet and not bossy. That's what I know about Billy. Of course, I know pretty much through my dad.
Now, how did that happen? How did your dad know Billy Webb?
Well, my dad started coming up here. Oh, I would imagine around 1904, 5, or 6. And he and a fellow named Joe Peterson, they were early. They liked photography.
Right.
And they would come up and they'd take pictures in old Celoron Park. If anybody had a great big fish, they'd take a picture of
No
the
kidding.
man and the fish. Oh yes. And they didn't make a great big business out of it, but they did like photography, and they did a little bit of it. So I don't know if he were here before Billy or not. Billy, of course, was a real good minor league ball player.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And he was a major league fielder.
Ah.
But he was not a major league hitter.
Is that right?
There's quite a few that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, even in those years, you had to hit, I would assume, probably 275, 280 as an infielder to stick in the majors. But otherwise, you were a little bit of a detriment, you know.
What was Billy Webb's background?
I never knew.
Yeah.
I never knew. He was enough older than I that he was somewhat my dad's age.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really never knew. Kate, his oldest daughter, he had two girls.
Okay.
Kate, I knew. I think Kate was a year or two older than I. But I knew Kate real good. And then the other daughter was born after Billy had passed away.
Oh, really?
Now, I can't remember her first name now.
Joan?
Yeah.
Now, what do you remember about Billy? He had a baseball team, right? He was a manager of a team. What was the name of the team?
Called them the Spiderwebs.
Spiderwebs?
Yeah.
What kind of, was it a semi-pro team?
Yep. It wasn't a league team as such. It just was exhibition. You
Right.
know.
Mm-hmm.
But we got a lot of good clubs in. Not just the great ones. I mean, like the Crawfords came, Homestead Grays came, House of David came. Oh, there were some other ones, but the ones that impressed me, the House of David, they were good. And of course, they had that old-fashioned pepper game, you know, where the ball went back and forth between the 3 or 4 of them. You know, they were good at it, and they were a good ball club. Of course, the Crawfords were real good because they had Josh Gibson as catcher and they had Buck Leonard at first base. The other ones I never knew too well, although they had some good pitching. They had some good pitching too. They were a good ball club.
Now, what else? Now, do you remember any specific game? Like, let's talk about in 1921. It was announced. In fact, I'll show you this. You were.
Yeah.
What do you remember about that time period?
Well, I was only 5 years old, so I can't remember too much about it. But I think even at 5, Babe Ruth impressed you.
Yep.
There was no question. What impressed me was that he had such a long backswing, and when he hit the ball, it really went, I'll tell you. And of course, they had, before the ball game, they had, like they're doing in the majors now, a little bit of practice and the fans show up, you know. And like people talk about the ball that went over the top of the bathhouse into the lake. But what impressed me more than anything was, of course, that was down the right field line, and he being a right field, being a right hand or left-hander, of course, he put them there. But what impressed me, we had a row of big, great, huge poplar trees, and he was putting those balls in right center and center field, clear into the top of those poplar trees. I swear, probably 450, 500 feet, clear into the top of those trees. The outfielders didn't even have a chance to get them because they'd eventually drop down to the ground. But oh, that was something. He really hit them.
Why were you there?
Well, as I say, my dad knew Billy. My dad liked baseball. My dad liked baseball. My dad grew up in Warren. He was born in Grand Valley. They came to Warren to continue their education, he and my aunt. And Warren was in what they call the Iron and Ore League. And the old great Pirate shortstop. That's where he was playing. He hadn't gone up to the Pirates yet.
Wagner.
Yep. And he said then you could tell that he was not going to be with it. And I can't remember now which team he was with, but you could tell he wasn't going to stay in the minors very much longer.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So we of course got hit by the Depression, and we didn't see as much Major League Baseball as they would have liked. So.
Then you moved from Warren. Your dad moved?
No, my dad did.
Oh, your dad did.
Yeah. My dad and mother met down in Warren.
Ah, okay.
My mother had just come from the Carlisle Indian School down in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, and she came up back to the reservation, wanted to work, so she came downriver on the Pennsylvania Railroad down to Warren, and she worked for a family, and I can't think of his name now. My dad happened to be working for him also. That's where they met. So when they finally decided to get married, a good friend of my dad's had already married and had moved up to Celoron. They convinced him they ought to come to Celoron. That was 1914.
Mm-hmm.
A year later, I was born, of course.
Yeah. Well, there was professional baseball in 1914 and 1915, and Billy Webb was the manager of the Warren team in 1914. And also,
that I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe that's where I knew him too.
Exactly. And then became the manager in 1915 here at Celoron. And then through that connection, probably, did your dad socialize with Billy Webb?
Not particularly. They knew each other enough to, when they'd see each other down front of the post office, they might talk a little bit, but I mean, they didn't otherwise really socialize.
Yeah.
Although they knew each other real good.
Then this day occurred. What do you remember about, this was in October of 1921, what do you remember about the ballpark itself? Celoron Park.
The ballpark itself? I thought it was good. In those years, it hadn't deteriorated like it eventually did.
Mm-hmm.
And it was in what I'd say pretty good shape, I thought.
Describe it. I guess I never saw it, and I've only seen a couple pictures of it.
Well,
it was where the apartments are.
Where Ellicott Shores is now, that was the outfield.
That was the outfield.
And so the outfield, in a sense, rimmed the lake. See, the lake comes down out of Murtis Bay, and right there, where the ballpark was, it swings to the right and becomes eventually the Chattacoin River, of course. Mm-hmm. We called it the outlet, which it is. I mean, it's the outlet of the lake. The ballpark was so straight from home plate. If Ruth hits one, he was hitting north and a little bit west. That's the way the ballpark was situated.
Mm-hmm.
So the right field line was straight north just about, and the left field line was straight west just about.
What kind of stands did they have?
Well, we had a big grandstand. Pretty good one. I couldn't tell you how many it seated, probably 300-400 anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And then we had bleachers either side of the grandstand. bleachers would sit probably a couple of hundred,
Mhm.
maybe three.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say probably you get probably 5,000 there with ease, and I mean you could crowd in more, I assume.
Did the cars sort of rim the outfield?
Yeah, the cars came in off of, now there was an old ice house that used to sit right on the lake, and it was about 50, 60 feet, maybe close to 100 from the left field line.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, it didn't interfere with anything because there was enough distance between, and there was an opening there. You could drive in off of what we call Jackson Avenue,
Mhm.
with Jackson and Duquesne. And you could drive in there, and you could also drive in from the park. But they didn't. That's where people came ordinarily. People would come in out of the park to come to the ball game, and
Mhm.
parking obviously on the streets somewhere, you know, and they probably came for both the park and the ball game. Yeah, that's what they used to do. They used to rim the outfield with cars.
I'll be darned.
And you could do it, you could probably do it 2 or 3 deep, you know, you could have one row and then another row. And that would be on the left field line, and it would be between, and there was a big wooden fence around it. I mean, all ballparks want paying customers. They
Yeah.
don't want just people to watch. They want them to pay to watch.
So the fence was along the foul lines, though, right? That's where you'd have the
Pretty
fence.
much,
Yeah.
pretty much, close.
So the outfield itself, though, there was no fence. It was just the lake.
Yeah, it was just a lake. Well, sometimes people would be in boats and they'd be watching.
I'll be
Of
darned.
course, they weren't seeing as good as we were.
Yeah.
But, I mean, they little observation, I guess.
Now, do you remember, other than what you mentioned on this day when Babe Ruth came to Celoron, did they have a parade? Did they?
That I don't remember. You know, I was only a little over 5,
Right.
and as I say, the most impressive thing to me was when he hit the ball and it went so far.
Yeah.
That was really it impressed me the most. Now they talk about actually being a ball game. That I don't remember too much about it. I can remember before the game, Ruth hitting, and I thought my dad told me that he got a couple of minor leaguers
Mm-hmm.
to come with him. In other words, he either couldn't convince some of his Yankee teammates, or he didn't want to pay them the amount maybe that they wanted. Anyway, I think Dad told me that he had a couple of 2 or 3 minor leaguers with him. He paid them, but I mean, obviously, he
Yeah.
probably didn't pay them nearly as much as he would have had to pay some star. Anyway, it probably was a game, but that portion I don't remember. I mean, a few things stand out to me.
Yeah.
That wasn't one of them.
Did you do you remember the size of the crowd there? Was it a rainy day? Was it a clear day? Or do you remember anything about the day?
That, no, but it seems to me we didn't have very many rainy days. It seems to me, isn't it funny? I remember game after game when real good ball clubs would come in, good semi-pro ball clubs would, and always is weather. I don't remember being weathered out ever.
Yeah.
Now maybe it happened, but not very often then, according to that.
Did you work at the ballpark?
Well, the Colburn boys used to take care of the infield. They had a big sled-like made of wood. It had spikes driven down through it, and they would drag that behind the car, and that way it would soften up the infield. They'd drag that around the infield, and then we'd cut the grass in the outfield. Now, I wasn't old enough to where I assumed too much. I just helped a little bit.
Yeah.
But then when the ball game started, we had what we called ball boys. Our job, there was one on, we sat clear in the back of the grandstand so that we could look down. When the ball went out over the top of the grandstand or out over the bleachers, we could see where it went, and there'd be a boy or a young man on each. There was a gate each side, and when the foul ball went out, it was our job to follow the flight of the ball and to point out where the ball went. And then there was always a crowd of boys that wanted to come in. The boy that got the ball then could come in the ball game.
I'll be darned.
And once in a while, the kid that picked the ball up took and ran with it. And but the boys on the gate, they were about half grown. They were probably 15, 16, 17 along in there. That I can remember. They were older than I. And they'd chase him and eventually get the ball. Except when the ball went over into Louis Lachine's yard. And Louis didn't like Billy. So if the ball got onto his yard, Louis Lachine ran and grabbed the ball. They claimed he had several bushels of baseball. I never knew how many. But he'd try to run out and beat the boy to the ball. Now and then he'd succeed.
Yeah.
And he wouldn't give the ball to the boy. Yeah. He didn't like Billy.
Yeah. Why is that?
I have no idea.
Yeah. Oh, that's terrific. Now, do you remember any other games that are very memorable to you at Celoron? When any of the other barnstorming teams would come in?
I remember the Boston Red Sox came in.
Mm-hmm. What do you remember about that?
Swat Erickson shut him out with 3 hits.
My golly.
So I understand he was offered a tryout. He'd been up at the Senators, you know, and then he worked some in the minors, and then he came home pretty much retired. But on a weekend, he would pitch for Billy now and then if he felt good, and he could still throw a few innings of pretty good ball.
Yeah.
You know, I'll never forget watching him warm up. What we call a they call a split finger now, which goes down, you know. Well, maybe he didn't throw it in a split finger fashion, but that ball would come up there and it would just dive. This was during the warm-up, so you can imagine what the batter faced would. Yeah, Swat was good.
Yeah. What about Hugh Bedient?
He was equally good. Billy went between the two of them. They were pretty much the pitchers that Billy got to face whomever came in. And they were still good enough that it was a good ball game.
Do you remember anything else about the spider webs? Some of the ball players, any of the other ball players they had?
The only one that I remember real good was Nagel. He played third base.
Joe Nagel.
Yeah. I remember him. He was another one. He probably could have played Major League Baseball. He too, like Billy, was a Major League infielder. But he couldn't hit them. Although he could hit in this league, you know, at this caliber. And then Billy used to get a guy out of Warren called Howard Onick. He'd get Howard up, and Howard was a right-hander. And every now and then, he could put a ball out down the left field line into the lake. And that wasn't quite as much of a feat as it was down going over the top of the bathhouse. But Howard was about the only one that succeeded in doing it on a regular basis. Oh gosh, he could hit. He was a big man.
Big guy.
He was big.
Rudy Carlson?
Don't remember him too good.
Yeah.
I know he played, and but I don't remember him that good.
How about Lehman Peterson?
Don't remember him that much.
Yeah,
I knew who he was,
yeah.
but you know.
What else? Now, as far as, of course, Celoron is known for its baseball. What happened to the stadium ultimately? You know, I don't really know. I know that the New York Penn League.
Yeah, they came in at what, 39?
39, yeah.
I think it was 39, and I thought it was a pretty good thing, but must be they figured that they couldn't draw the people from Jamestown up here. But
How would they get from Jamestown to Celoron then?
that's what I'm trying to remember. When did we get the buses? I think 36. I think the buses started in 36. So the streetcars had gone out.
Yeah.
we 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 kind of liked the idea of the buses coming in, but then we kind of reached a point where we kind of sorry that the streetcars had gone.
Yeah. Were the steamers stopping by then? Do you recall them?
Well, it was come and go, or it was a hit and miss. Different people tried to run it, and it didn't seem. Well, then a man from Celoron named Chet McCrae, he built the dock. In the meantime, had been ice coming down. They'll usually take the dock out. It will wreck it, and if you don't do anything, eventually it'll wreck the whole dock. Well, anyway, he came in, and one of his first things was to get volunteer help to drive the spiles and make the dock as it had been one time.
Yeah.
And so then he would run excursions up to Midway Park for roller skating.
Mm-hmm.
And gosh, I remember that was cheap. I think it was he was a kind of a contractor, and he had a yard there. And I don't know whether they cut it. It had a metal hull,
Yeah.
and I don't know whether they cut it up or what they did. I never.
Now, back to the ballpark here for a second. After 1939, the professional team, Jamestown, left and played in Jamestown. Actually played in Allen Park and then Jamestown. What happened to the ballpark up here?
Well, it still was there, but it was deteriorating.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, nobody was taking care of it, and nobody was playing anymore, you know, and Billy was gone, of course. There was nobody to push it. Well, there'd be a ball game. The high school sometimes would play down there. It was still a good enough field.
Yeah.
If somebody cut the grass, you know,
Yeah.
and line the line. Yeah, I remember one thing that stands out there. Can't think of his first name. Named Brown, and he went up and played with the St. Louis Browns.
Walt Brown.
Walt Brown, and I can remember when he was still in high school, and they're playing some, I imagine, a playoff game, and he was so good that the batters were just plainly overmatched. They couldn't handle it. They couldn't handle him at all. He was good. He was good.
Now, did they just demolish the stadium? You remember?
Well, little by little, it practically fell down.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, as I recall it, it reached a point where really it wasn't safe anymore. You know, I mean, buildings, it was all of wood, and I wasn't paying too much attention. I mean, I always figured it more or less just about fell down, and it was torn the rest of the way down so that nobody'd get hurt.
Yeah.
You know.
Did your paths, switching gears here, did your paths cross with Lucille Ball's?
Well, only in the sense that she was 6 years older than I.
Right.
And that's another thing. They say, well, how can you remember? She was 6 years ahead of you in school. I'd like to know anybody that couldn't be impressed with Lucille even then or later.
Yeah. What impressed you about her?
Lively, vivacious, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
She was just full of it.
Mm-hmm.
Like my mother belonged to the American Legion, and my mother said 2 or 3 times she volunteered to come and be part. You know, they'd have a meeting, and then there'd be entertainment. Lucille would come down, sing and dance for them.
Yeah.
Yeah. The lady said at that time that Lucille had something that you know, I mean, you could tell she was going to do something.
Yeah.
She would just.
And did she have a reputation around here?
Well, like everybody, why? Good, bad, and otherwise.
Yeah,
I guess you
sure,
might say.
sure.
Some people can't can't stand it that she became a star, and whether it's envy or what, and they'll tell tales which may be a ring of truth, but it isn't the whole truth.
Right, right.
And like everything else, and there are other people that think that she never did anything wrong. Well, we all have. So no, Lucille was, from what I knew of her, she was just a girl who was going to go someplace someday.
Yeah.
You know, but she certainly had it. Her good buddy was Pauline Lopez,
Mm-hmm.
and they lived, well, just practically side by side, and they were good buddies. And as I remember it, Pauline would write the play, and Lucille would act it out. I mean, maybe I'm embellishing it, but I mean that's how I remember it.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were pretty good
You were talking about your favorite baseball team. It was the Athletics?
for a number of years.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Why Philadelphia?
Well, I like Connie Mack. I can remember when he was playing. He was pretty good. But I mean, some players you like whether they're real great or not. Sometimes you like the greatest, and you like those in between. And of course, I like Jimmy Fox. I like Lefty Grove, Al Simmons. They were good ball clubs.
What did you do for a living?
Well, when I finally got a job, I went to Marlin Rock.
Really?
Then what do you think happened? We had a war come on.
Exactly.
So I joined the Air Force.
You were in the Air Force? Were you over in Europe or?
No.
No?
I went into phase training.
Oh, okay.
Wasn't my choice.
Yeah.
I learned I learned real young, real early, that you don't tell them what's going to happen. They tell you.
Exactly. Exactly.
And so I went along with them.
Yeah.
Yeah. A friend of mine and I, we got real patriotic. We were having trouble with the B-17s. They only had what they called a flexible gun
Mm-hmm.
in the tail gunner, and they had trouble. First of all, it was only a third of caliber. Secondly, when they went to twist the gun into the tail stream, it was awfully hard. You had to be a big man to do it, and big men could not get into the tail. It was so crowded. So we were. Well, I wasn't small, but I was slender, and I figured maybe I could wiggle my way in there.
Yeah.
So we went in. We thought we'd volunteer to be tail gunners. That's what they needed. And we went up, followed the chain of command, and we got up to a colonel. And we told our story, and he said, well, he said, more or less what he told us, he said, we think we know what we're doing. And we think that you're doing more good where you are than what you do if you get your desire. So he said, you probably better be happy with where you are. So that ended that.
Oh, great.
Yeah, and if they had put us in there, it might not have worked out too good.
It's right.
You never know.
It's right. So you've been in Celoron all your life.
Yep, I was born here.
And what the big attraction for Celoron for years and years was the park itself.
Sure.
Did you work at the park?
Off and on.
Yeah.
Off and on. I had a grandmother down the Warren, and I had a grandmother out at Red House,
Oh, yeah.
and both of them were widows. So I'd go down and I'd visit.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'd stay a month, stay a couple of weeks, and that was my opportunity to get to know them and to visit, you know.
Sure. Now, your mother came from Carlisle. I went to law school in Carlisle.
Did you?
Yep. And she went to the Indian school right there. Now, did her paths cross with, like, the Chief Benders or the... let me turn this off for a second?
Yeah. Just turn it to your... Yeah. No, it isn't working too good. I was making a little noise. Chief Bender was before her time,
right?
but her best friend married Jim Thorpe.
I'll be darned.
So my mother came back soon after the night. Well, my mother came back about 1914, I would say, and that's when she went down to Warren and met my dad. And they never corresponded. I can't think of the lady's name, but anyway, Jim Thorpe then came to some kind of a doings down in Gowanda. Oh, that probably was after World War II, and my mother knew that he was going to be there, so we went down, and she went up to him. I'll bet they talked an hour.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Wow.
Because they, as I say, my mother's best friend was later. Stop it!
Well, she's fine. She's fine. No, she's fine. She's fine. She's fine. Just a good, friendly dog.
Oh yeah, we love her. Even she's not perfect, but we love her.
Yeah, that's great.
And she's a good dog in most cases. Yeah. So he told her his life, and she told him hers, because they were good friends.
Yeah.
Yeah, he had a strange life too.
Sure did. Now, tell me about the school. What did your mother say about the Carlisle Indian School?
Well, Carlisle was intended to bring the young Indian children there and to get rid of their Indianness. In other words, to make them white in every way but their skin coloring.
Mm-hmm.
And while they gave them quite a bit of schooling, they also taught them to have a trade. The men learned to tailor, to do all sorts of things that would help them later on. The girls all learned to do good washing, ironing, sewing, so forth, and that's along with their schooling. So it was the intent was all right, but it didn't really work.
Did your mother resent being put on a school?
No.
No?
What she didn't care for was the fact that first, my mother was first, and then she had a sister,
Mm-hmm.
2 years younger. And sister was sickly, so my grandmother kind of babied her.
Mm-hmm.
And so the Quakers had a school down to Quaker Bridge.
Mm-hmm.
And so my mother sent her first down to Quaker Bridge, and when she had gotten all the schooling that she did down there, then my grandmother sent her to Carlisle.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in one way, it was good, and in another way, my mother resented it because she would rather have been home with her mother.
Mm-hmm.
So who knows?
Yeah. Interesting. Interesting.
No, she didn't resent the fact that they were trying to make a white person out of her.
Yeah. Now, have you kept up with? You obviously have Indian blood in you. Do you keep?
I'm only half.
You have Indian, but do you keep that tradition alive? Have you?
Well, I know that we go back to Mary Jameson.
Mm-hmm.
So I suppose on my dad's side we go back to the Massachusetts colony, and so one of these days I'm going to join the SAR, Sons of the American Revolution. Join that on my father's side. I suppose I could join it on the other side too.
Exactly. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
Are you a genealogist? Do you like history?
I never was, but my cousin down to Warren was, and she keeps after me. She said, I gave you all the documentation. Now all you got to do is just go down and present it, and you're a member of the SAR.
Yeah.
I said, yeah, I'll get around to it. So now my daughter's pushing a little bit on it, so maybe I will do it.
I think that's terrific.
Oh, that's on my father's side. That's
Right.
Sons of the American Revolution.
Yeah.
And my daughter will join then the DAR.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
You've led an interesting life.
Yeah. And Pauline Lopez, whom we talked about before, was in the DAR, and I know she interested one of my sisters in joining the DAR. And Pauline, one time, I knew Pauline, of course, wanted me and my wife to come down to the DAR building she wanted to show us. They were doing some renovation work at that time. That's a gorgeous old home.
Isn't it though?
You walk in and on your right is the most beautiful woodwork I ever saw.
Mm-hmm. When you came back from the war, did you go back to MRC? Or the...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Until the strike.
Okay.
We had a strike 8.5 months.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah. I picketed, I think it was 3 or 4 days a week. At the end of the strike, it didn't seem to me that we had achieved what we should have if I hadn't been out that long. So I went out looking for work. Went down to Blackstone Corporation. They told me I had a job. I came down there and I said, "Oh, that job that we had for you, we arranged our personnel so that we didn't need you for that job." Marlon Rockwell, when we settled, in the meantime, the Christmas vacation pay, of course, that happened while we were on strike, and the vacation pay happened while we were on strike. And in order to get both the vacation pay and the Christmas bonus, we had to work 6 weeks.
Hmm.
And 40 of us, after we got it, quit. Marlon Rockwell was upset.
Mm-hmm.
So when I went down and supposedly had the job down to Blackstone Corporation, obviously they had called up to the Manufacturers Association, and I was one of the 40 that had worked 6 weeks and then quit. Didn't have a job anymore.
Hmm.
So I went down and worked down to the old Odsonia Mill. It was a company that making rough boxes and footlockers
Mm-hmm.
for the Army. I worked there for a year, then that contract petered out. I didn't have a job then. So I was 6 weeks, I kept going to a lot of places, including Blackstone. One day I came down there and they said, "You said that you could run engine lathes and turret lathes?" I said, "Yes." Well, it seemed that one of the men over to Blackstone on Blackstone Avenue had quit and they needed somebody. Well, I guess in the intervening time that year, they either figured that had cleansed me of my sin, or they needed somebody worse than what they, in other words, they're wanting a man, so they were willing to take me on, so they did. So then I worked there till I retired. Oh, we sold the old Blackstone plant and moved over to on the corner of Allen and what? That's Carolina.
Carolina.
No, Allen and Carolina.
Though a lot of people worked on there for Mr. Linnae, right?
Sure did.
Yeah. Does the name Leonard Carlson mean anything to you? Whitey?
I knew some Carlsons. I don't know Leonard Carlson. You don't have any idea what he did?
I think he worked at Malleable in the foundry there.
Oh no, I wouldn't.
Yeah.
Eventually, we did take over Malibu, but not early in my time that I was there.
Did you have much contact with Mr. Linnae?
Only in that I was a vice president of our labor union for a number of years, plus a steward, things like that. So he knew who I was.
Yeah.
And he spoke.
Yeah.
And he was not too bad a guy, but he wanted things his own way.
Yeah.
He figured that he owned it, or little by little he eventually owned it all. And he figured he owned it, he was going to run it his way. Which is all right, except that the workers have a little bit of say as to how their life is going to be in the plant. So we differed occasionally.
Yeah.
We had quite a few strikes.
Yeah. Now, who was Now, did you you were at the negotiating table?
Yep.
Who else? Who was there for Blackstone? I mean, did Mr. Linné didn't negotiate, did he?
We always got a room at the hotel. Reg had a separate room, and Walt Brady was the personnel manager, who was a good man. And he'd come out and we'd talk back and forth, and then he'd go see Reggie, then he'd come back, talk some more. He couldn't make too many moves without Reg knowing what was going on.
Yeah.
Well, then one time we got sick of that business. We told him that we wouldn't negotiate unless Reg met us face to face. Well, he balked, but we stuck to our guns. So he finally did. Came face to face. Just the one time, but he did. He gave in.
I'll be darned.
Yeah.
Mr. Cadwell, Sherry Cadwell.
Yeah. Sherry was a good man. Yeah, we liked Sherry. Of course, I can remember him when we were younger. I was older than he, but I mean, I can remember him in the group.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Sherry was pretty good. I liked him.
Yeah. Well, he was the attorney, right?
Yeah. Not anymore. I think the company that took over the the truck radiators, they have their own lawyers. So Sherry's, I think Sherry's about ready to give up anyway.
Yeah.
He either is about to or has.
Yeah.
I think he's probably retired by now, isn't he?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I gotta tell you, this has been so much fun talking to you. You're a very articulate guy.
Well, we had a lot of fun growing up. Great Depression was kind of hard on a lot of people. I wouldn't say I remember it completely fondly, but I don't have any real resentment. Now, my dad and a lot of other fathers probably, they were the ones that suffered.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Now, during that time period, that's when Celoron Park was sort of starting to wane a little bit, its interest and popularity.
I think they were trying. They were putting on 3-cent days and everything else, doing their very best to get people to come. But with the advent of the automobile, all those big excursions that we used to get, you know, the excursion cars would come right on. You know, we had the tracks that came right on into the park, would swing around there by the Penny Arcade and the merry-go-round, and then came out Lake Street out to Dunham. Well, the excursion cars would pull in there, hundreds of people on each one, and that helped. Plus, people that would come from Jamestown, and you know, but that slowly changed with the automobile.
Yeah.
And then, hey, we used to get a kick out of it. People would come and bring their kids into the park, give the kids a quarter, go to the beer joint, spend $3 or $4 and complain about how much the park cost a kid. They gave him a quarter or 50 cents. Misplaced something, right?
Exactly. Speaking of cost, how much it cost to go to the baseball game? So when you went, when they had the semi-pro games and Billy Webb, do you remember what the cost was for admission?
Usually around 50 cents, as I recall. Right around there. Yeah. Now maybe we used to get the Pirates quite frequently.
Oh, okay.
And gee, if I remember right, I can even remember the Pirates coming, I think, twice in one season. But we did get the Pirates, I'd say, half a dozen times, probably, just in the time that I can remember. Now, there was another team that I liked, too, because I saw the Wiener boys, and I saw Archie Vaughn, the shortstop, Gus Zer, the first baseman, Pie Trainer, the third baseman. You know, it was a good ball club. Now, they weren't winning the World Series, but they were always contending. They just weren't quite making it. But they were a darn good ball club. So when you saw them, you were seeing real good Major League ball game.
What would bring them to Celoron?
Money. It wasn't much, but it was something.
Yeah.
And we'd get, I'd say, a pretty good turnout. I couldn't tell you how many, but I can remember what I considered to be a good turnout.
Again, this was Billy Webb bringing them in?
Yeah.
Well, was Billy Webb sort of is he the entrepreneur, or how did he get these teams here?
I really don't know that, but Celoron was known, as I say. We got the Crawfords, we got the Homestead Grays, we got the House of David, we got the old Boston Braves, and we got the Pirates. And there were other teams, not as well known, not major leaguers, but good teams came in, and good baseball was played. And so turnouts were adequate. I mean, everybody made a little bit. Nobody got rich, that's certain.
Yeah.
But we saw a lot of baseball, so I enjoyed it.
And again, your recollection of Babe Ruth. You're 5 years old, 1921, right? And hitting home runs.
I'll never forget it. I never saw anybody hit a ball so hard and so far. I never saw anybody put balls in those poplar trees before or since. Well, now, they make so much of that one ball that went over the bathhouse. Now, the bathhouse was about 3 stories tall because as a part of its being a bathhouse, it also had a slide that you could slide down it on a little wheeled sled, like you want to call it, and you'd plane out into the water maybe 150, maybe 200 feet, and then as speed reduced by you'd lose momentum, and then you'd but it was nice. So in order to give them enough height and enough speed to get going when they hit the water that they'd plane out there, it had to be 3 stories high, and that's why they were made so much of it, because that was bathhouse. The line came right to the bathhouse, the right field line, and the ball went over there. But it seems to me that I can remember other people putting a ball over that, because it wasn't the bathhouse. I'm sure people hit the bathhouse occasionally, but it seems to me that other people put the ball over there. I don't think Ruth was the only one that ever did it. I'm not sure of that. Now, I could be wrong.
It's a great story anyways.
Yeah, it's a great story. But that's the story they put the emphasis on, was that he had hit a ball over the bathhouse into the lake. And I was much more impressed to seeing those balls go out into the top of their poplar trees.
Now, you didn't get the ball that went into the lake. So it sounds like everybody did.
No, no, that's not a bit. Yeah, he wasn't really a dead right field hitter. He didn't hit the opposite field very often, but he hit an awful lot into right center and center. And of course, that was the way they were pitching him. They didn't want him to hit down the right field line all the time, you know, because ordinarily that would be, the right field would be closer than the center field. Center field is a little harder to hit a ball in there, like Yankee Stadium. Center field used to be an awe. You used to have, if you hit a home run to center field, you were superhuman.
Exactly.
Gosh. And yet down the foul lines, one of them was only 297 feet.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, Roger Maris took advantage of that.
Yes, he did. And so did a lot of the Yankees that were really not great home run hitters, but they would thread the ball down through there. Yeah.
That's terrific.
And McGuire just got another one, number 37, today.
You really follow baseball. This is great.
Yeah.
What other hobbies do you have?
Metal detecting, which I like.
Yeah. What have you found that's been extraordinary while you've been metal detecting?
Nothing really. I came onto it late, and there's a lot of places in Old Celoron Park that if they weren't so overgrown, I know where all the buildings were.
Ah.
But the brush and the trees have grown up to a point where you can't swing a detector.
Yeah.
Now, I belong to the Moose, the Jamestown Moose, and we were going to buy that portion that is now belongs to the bank between Dunham and the Ellicott Shores. I think we were going to pay around $400,000 for it, which was a good buy. But we had an awful lot of problems, money problems down at the Moose.
That's what I understand, yeah.
We changed administrators. I don't know.
I bet there's probably nobody in Celoron other than you who can remember first-hand experience going to see Babe Ruth play.
I don't know. I never talked much about it to other people. Well, of course, a lot of people my age, there's a lot of, I think there's more ladies. Ladies outlive us to a certain extent. There's a lot of ladies my age, but of course they weren't going to see Babe Ruth.
That's right.
And their husbands are gone. Now, Stan Batchelor is behind me. Now, he's just enough younger that he wouldn't have seen him. I'm 83 and Stan is 79 or 80, and he obviously would have missed it. And he liked baseball too. He was interested. Yeah, he and I went to Cleveland a few times. Major League.
Did you guys ever keep scorecards or anything like that from?
I don't know. Didn't that? I should have it. It would have been so much more interesting if I had, but no.
How about autographs? Would that have any interest?
No, that was. I can't recall anybody stopping the big stars for autographs. We didn't do it then. And baseball cards, another. I never collected baseball cards. Look at the value of some of those baseball cards. Honus Wagner for one.
It's unbelievable.
It's unbelievable. I watch what they call the Antique Roadshow on PBS, and then there's a couple of others at the auction and something else. I watch them. Some of those things. Now I don't know how old my clawfoot chair is, but it's quite old. It goes back before my family.
Isn't that beautiful? My golly.
And that cornucopia, that goes back too. You can't see it for the lamp, but the headboard is the cornucopia, all the grapes and the apples and the plums and the pears and the peaches.
This is extraordinary. This is great.
And that Bible stand, that came from the farm down in Grand Valley. They came to Warren in 1895, and that came from the farm, so it's been around a while.
This is unbelievable. Beautiful.
Yeah. And that clock, that came off out of Depot and the Erie Railroad.
Well, you have some valuable stuff here. Now, do you live here alone?
My wife died in 1990. Yeah. When she was pregnant for our daughter, I'd been talking about quitting. I was smoking 2.5 packs a day, and she was smoking a pack and a half. And she came to me and said, "You've been talking about quitting, and I'm getting a little, like morning sickness she was getting." So she said, "Let's quit together." Fine. And I quit. She came to me in about 2 or 3 weeks, and she said, "I can't make it. Can't make it."
Yeah.
So it went on. I would like her to quit, but she couldn't. When my daughter was about the 5th grade, health class, of course, they talked about the evils of smoking. So she came home and she tore into her mother, "I don't want to lose you. I want you around a while." So my wife agreed to quit again. And she gave it an all-out effort. Couldn't make it.
Yeah.
No. So she had her right lung removed. 1989, died in 1990.
Yeah.
We didn't catch it in time. It had metastasized and gone into her brain. So one of the portions of the brain they used radiation. They got rid of it. But a few months later, it came back in another spot.
Yeah.
So the other lung then was taking a licking, so she couldn't possibly make it.
Yeah.
And the doctor assured us it was smoking.
Yeah.
So then my daughter, in the meantime, had learned to smoke. Took her 8 years after her mother quit for her to quit.
Mm-hmm.
She'd inherited that same recessive gene that my wife had,
Mm-hmm.
that makes it, if not impossible, makes it far, far harder for them to quit than it was for me. When I quit,
Yeah.
quit, that's all.
Yeah.
Oh, occasionally I carried my lighter in my watch pocket and my cigarettes here. And for a long time, I'd find myself going down here for some reason or coming up here for cigarettes. They weren't there, but I mean, it was habit.
Habit. Sure.
Yeah. So I wished, hindsight, I wished I'd tried harder to make her quit. I don't know, it's awfully hard.
Exactly.
But other ones are in the same boat. Some people have an awful time. They have the devil's own time
Yep.
quitting.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, if not impossible, it is hard.
Yeah.
And it's a shame. Yeah, my wife took lessons of smoking.
Yeah.
She was having an awful time learning to smoke. Had an awful time inhaling. She said the first time she inhaled it made her sick. But she kept up.
Different time now. You know, it's funny. Funny.
Yep, it is.
Do you work at all with the local historic society? You know, you have such a wealth of knowledge.
I haven't, but I'm interested.
Yeah. I mean, you've seen an awful lot. I bet you probably saw some of the fires at Celoron Park, didn't you?
Sure did. What a shame. What a shame. We had an open air dance hall right next door to Jerry Peterson's Marina. Now that's down there on the east side of Lucille Park.
Mm-hmm.
That burned down just before I was born.
Mm-hmm.
No, I guess I was born, but I was only a couple of years. I think I was born 17 or 18. And then in 19, the old auditorium there, which was adjacent to the ballpark, that was huge. That burned, I think, in 19.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Pier Ballroom burned, what, 26? Yeah. And previous to that time, the old Hotel de Celoron, that was 8 stories. That was right next door to the Imperial. Imperial used to be 4 stories. The Hotel de Celoron was 8. That burned in the middle teens. And eventually, of course, the pier burned, the new pier. Then the Imperial burned, and then the Lakeview burned. Every one of them burned to the ground. And we suspect, we don't know, we think the chances are good that they all were set.
Yeah.
But proof is something else.
Exactly.
You know?
You remember when they took the Ferris wheel down?
A sorry day.
Yeah.
I guess it's cut up now. I think they used it for a while out in California.
Mm-hmm.
I think now I think they said they took it down. I'm not sure. That was quite an attraction in its day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Between you and what's his name, Mr. Norton, Vic Norton?
I never knew Vic. I knew who he was. That's about all.
Yeah.
He was enough older than I to where we weren't in the same age group, you know. So that I don't know how much older than he was, but he was older, I know.
Is his son still around?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Don't
Does they have? Did you ever collect pictures of the old Celoron Park or anything like that?
Someday I'm going to go through. My dad used to have quite a few pictures, and I've got a few that I've never looked through. My sister got the bulk of the pictures, and I'll have to ask one of my nieces what they have, because it's kind of interesting. I'd like to look at them again.
Yeah.
I don't know that he had an awful lot of pictures of the park, but I know there were some.
Mm-hmm. We did a. I'm going to leave this with you because you just. I did a paper on Billy Webb.
Did you?
Yep, and you can have that.
Well, you know more about Billy than I did because I didn't know. See, if he were manager down to Warren, that's where my dad met him in the beginning. Then they were friends then before each of them came to Celoron then.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll be darned. See, now that's something I didn't know. Well, my dad didn't tell me everything,
Yeah.
but I remember my dad telling me about Hannes Wagner, because he was really impressed with Hannes. But
What did he say about Hannes?
he was just plain great. That's all. He was great from the day my dad saw him till he got to a point where he couldn't do it anymore. Like he used to tell a story about Ty Cobb told him, what was he said something about it? He said, "Kraut head, I'm coming down," and Hannes said, "Come on, I'm waiting for you."
That's right.
Oh God.
But Billy Webb,
Now,
in doing
can I have this?
Yeah, sure.
Good.
You can have it.
Thank you.
No,
I'll read it. That'll tell me more than what I know.
Well, hopefully you'll find it interesting. I did a last spring. I did this paper. I wrote it up, and I interviewed some of the old ball players who there aren't many around. You can suspect who played with Billy. Leon Button played with him. Park Catchpole, the attorney, was the mascot for Billy Webb Spiders.
I don't remember it.
And a few people like Vince McNamara, he played with Billy Webb. We interviewed them, and I put together an hour-long video on the Billy Webb story. And I showed it to Joan Webb, who was the young daughter,
Yeah, I know her.
and the grandson. And they all drove in, came in, and we had a special day, and I passed out this booklet, and I also showed the video. And maybe someday I'll put it on cable television, a local
Channel 8.
yeah. And I'll let you know when it comes on.
That'd be good. I'd watch it for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it had. But anyways, what Joan had that was wonderful is she found a bag in her basement of pictures. She had no idea what it was.
Oh, good.
And she brought it up and she said, "Here, Greg, I think you might find this interesting." So I looked at it. It's all the pictures, a ton of pictures of Celoron Park playing baseball, and some of it were live action shots.
For heaven's sakes.
I've never seen this stuff. So right now we're having them put on laser discs so we can preserve them,
Oh gosh, yes.
but it's priceless.
Yeah.
But similarly, you probably got stuff when you look at your old photos that
It's funny now. Joe Peterson, my dad, they took quite a few photos, and I don't know if we had my folks moved over, lived on Burtis Street, and during the war they moved over and they moved down in here on Jones and Gifford, or Boulevard as we call it.
Yeah.
And in that move, a lot of stuff got left over there or misplaced or something. And I'm thinking a lot of pictures maybe never made it.
Yeah.
And we had a big, what had been previously a boathouse, and it was towed across the street. And Dad and Mom used it both for their car and the upstairs for whatever they didn't want to throw away. That was storage.
is that right?
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to leave you my business card, and if you come across anything that's sort of baseball related in Celoron, I would be thrilled to come and take a look at it.
Sure. As I say, I'm gonna contact one of my nieces, and well, just one. I got just one niece now, and see what. I know my sister took a lot of the pictures to look them over, and as far as I know, never returned them. Now I've got a few. When my mother passed away, one of my sisters said, "Here, you take them. You probably." I was the oldest, and she said, "You probably know more about these pictures than they did." So I don't know. I miss my mother a lot. Miss my dad. Well, we miss everybody.
Sure.
But somehow or other, all that stuff that I haven't looked through it, I'm going to have to.
Well, I'll put you in charge of it now. You're the chairman to take a look at that, because I bet there's probably something there. Maybe some stuff for the Carlisle Indian School. So I went to, like I said, I went to law school there in Carlisle.
Isn't that something?
And I went to the school, which is now part of the Army War College. And I always found that very intriguing and interesting.
Yeah, see, that was the old Carlisle barracks.
That's right.
Yeah.
And it's still there.
Yeah. See, that's why they disbanded the school. They had to have the barracks again.
I'll be darned.
Yeah. Yeah. My mother was there 4 or 5 years, something like that. Previous to that time, she'd been at Quaker school down at Quaker Bridge. When ran out of, you have a definite, that was like, what, 4th, 5th, and 6th grade, something like that. And if you want more education, you went down to Carlisle or out to Haskell. Now Haskell, I guess, is all they have.
That's right, yeah.
Two of my cousins went to Haskell, but I had no interest in going there.
I have taken up an awful lot of your time. This has been a lot of fun for me.
Me too.
Yeah, this has been terrific.
You've let me babble on here.
Oh, I want to hear, because I find people interesting, and you're interesting, and you lived and you've lived and continue to live an interesting life.
Well, we hope so.
Yeah.
We hope so.
Oh, this is fabulous.
That's what makes life worthwhile. Got to show an interest in something. As you say, I still like baseball. I sure do. As soon as you leave, back goes the baseball on. Yep.
Well, I tell you what,
that's just great that we have ESPN. That has made a world of difference. Yep.
Do you remember the name Johnny Newman?
Sure.
What do you remember about Johnny Newman?
He hit prodigious home runs. He was a fair-sized man, a little heavy, but boy, he could hit, I'll tell you. Yeah.
Does the name Jake Pittler mean anything to you?
Well, I can remember him when he was what? He was manager with what? Was it Olean? I can remember him from there. Saw him a few times.
Do you remember it?
Never knew him or anything, just saw him.
Did you go to the games in Jamestown?
Not as a regular basis. I wouldn't say I've lost interest. It's just, must be I thought I was too busy. Maybe I wasn't, but I thought I was. Well, I go down here. Oh, maybe I'll go down 6 times.
Great.
I could probably and should go down more often. But now and then, seems to me, sometimes they take too darn long. I don't know whether that's a trait in the low minors or what, but things do not move along. Well, occasionally in the majors they don't move along too good either. Sometimes that pitcher diddles and dawdles around. He isn't solving a thing by taking all that spare time. If he knows what he wants to throw it.
Well, if you get cable, you got cable.
Oh, sure.
On August 9th on 5:30 at 5:30 in the afternoon, they have a program called Senior Living. It's every day, every weekday at 5:30. But starting,
maybe I better mark it down. Perked up to we go dancing up to the Fairmont Grill. And I knew her a little bit enough to say hello to her, not socialize or anything, but I used to see her up there quite frequently, and I never knew if possibly she worked there or if she just came up. But anyway, she was quite a gal too.
Oh, was there?
Yeah, well, nice person,
yeah,
nice person, very friendly. Well, he was too. He was too, but I never got to know him too well.
Was Greg Malevy That name was either man. He was the manager then. What you're going to see on the video, it was fun for me to do because we interviewed a lot of the old ball players, and every time I'd say Johnny Newman, their eyes would light up, and they'd have some story. And after a while, you kind of did this enough of those interviews. You say, I'm going to pull a little bit out of here, here, and here anytime on Johnny Newman, because he clearly was a character. And then we found a movie. Somebody had done a movie in 1941 in color, and it's Johnny Newman taking batting practice. Unbelievable. Unbelievable old footage.
Yeah.
So you'll see all that.
Yeah. Oh, I go back to radio days when I used to listen to the old-time radio broadcasters.
Mm-hmm.
They were good.
What was your favorite broadcaster?
Who Detroit's long-time broadcaster?
Harwell? Ernie Harwell?
Ernie Harwell, right. I like Red Barber.
Do you remember Rosie Rosewall for the Pirates?
I sure do. He was a homer, but I still liked him. I never cared much for the old St. Louis and then the Chicago Cubs. What's his name?
Carey.
Now the Carries are in there. There's Skip and there's Skip and what's the other one? Skip and Chip.
Mm-hmm. Chip, yeah.
Yeah, and they both are like a lot Carey tradition. They talk partially through their nose.
Yep.
And sometimes I get a little sick of that.
That's right. Now, Rosie Rosewall, and my dad talks to me about him. What do you remember about him?
Oh gosh. First of all, I liked the Pirates.
Yeah.
And I wanted them to win. And of course he was a homer, so it was, of course they all are to a certain extent, they have to be. But I liked, as I say, I liked the Pirates, so Rosie pleased me. I mean, I like to listen to him. Yeah.
Is there any particular players in the Pirates that you remembered?
Oh gosh, I named the ones that you remember. The latter day Pirates. I liked them. I had funny. Now that my wife is gone, I haven't been going. But we'd go down to see the Pirates twice a year. My wife grew up baseball. Her dad, and her brother both were Yankee fans. And she said she used to get so sick of it, so she kind of liked it. We'd go down and watch Pirate games. We took her dad a few times with us, but he wanted to go to Cleveland to see the Yankees. And I went out to Cooperstown. Well, I've been out there several times, and Bob Feller. So I didn't want to get, but I'd seen Bob Feller, and I told him I saw him pitch 3 times, and I saw him lose 3 times. And he said, you weren't the only one. He said, and if he said, to make it worse, he said, I did myself in. He said the Yankees always gave him trouble. He gave them trouble too. And he said, the catcher threw him back, and he said, I nonchalantly reached for it, missed it, the guy scored from third base, and they beat me. Yeah, he says, bad enough that they beat me. He says, I beat myself. Yeah. I took my father-in-law out. Herb Score was pitching. He was a die-hard Yankee fan. Herb Score shut him out on three singles. He was not happy.
Do you remember, going back to Rosie Rosewall for a second, do you remember the home run call? He'd say, open the window, Aunt Minnie.
Oh boy. As I say, I liked him. I liked Ernie Harwell too. I could get Detroit pretty good, and of course I could always get the Pirates.
KDKA.
Yeah. And me and my dad, when Buffalo was doing pretty good there, when Ollie Carnegie was hitting home runs, we liked Ollie. Ollie was from Youngstown. My uncle was a railroad engineer in Youngstown, and he remembered Ollie. And there was a kind of connection there. Ollie was a real good minor league home run hitter. Well, I guess that was the extent of it. But he can really hit.
Well, he managed in Jamestown one year, 1944.
And I wasn't here.
That's right, you're in the war.
Yeah.
Well, Mr. Knapp, I can't thank you enough.